Well, California Senator Dianne Feinstein's funeral will be held today in San Francisco, followed by a private burial. Now, the senator leaves behind a lasting legacy of reaching across the aisle to work on bipartisan legislation, which is the very thing 8 extremist Republicans determined was grounds for Speaker McCarthy's ousting. Here to talk about all of this and more is Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Carolyn. Great to see you.
Good to see you, too. Sometimes there are these things in the news cycle that make me say, oh, I can't wait to hear Caroline's take on this. And this was definitely one of those weeks. We'll get to the McCarthy story in a moment, but I want to start with the funeral today. Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer are all among the dignitaries expected to attend today's memorial service in San Francisco for the late senator. She's going to be missed so dearly by so many. Tell us a little bit about what Dianne Feinstein meant for you, for the city of San Francisco, and for our state.
Well, when I think of Dianne Feinstein, I think about the California dream because she and Barbara Boxer being elected, the two women senators from California, the Thelma and Louise, as they were dubbed back in '92, are really what drew me to this state. The idea that, that we could have this sort of progress. That was the year of the woman. I'm sure many people have heard the long list of firsts that Dianne Feinstein was involved with, but I'll say as a Cub legislative assistant who was working in Congress when she was there. I ran into her once in the subway, and she asked about my member on the House side, and then she immediately asked whether or not I plan to run for public office. Of course, I chose a different path, but she's been a personal inspiration, and I think an inspiration to millions of girls and women.
You know, speaking of getting more women to run for office, Gavin Newsom fulfilled his promise and appointed a black woman, LaFonza Butler, to replace Feinstein. Now, she becomes just the 3rd black female senator in history, but it's still unclear if she's going to enter the crowded Senate race for Feinstein's seat, which has already been sort of underway. Do you think she's going to run, and how does her appointment impact that race?
Well, I think she should run because it will increase her name recognition, but it's very clear that Gavin Newsom chose a caretaker for this role. She's not a household name. She has an incredible resume, and incumbency advantage in the Senate runs around 90%, and you would think that that would bode well for her, but she only has a couple of months to really get some name recognition before the primary contest. So I think she should run. I think it's an uphill battle, though, to win that race.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has changed the landscape of the 2024 race for the Senate seat, for sure. Let's turn to the chaos. We'll call it chaos in the House, where for the first time in U.S. history, 8 Republicans have ousted the Speaker of the House, leaving lawmakers scrambling and unsure of how to navigate just the basic functions of government. But was that the point? I mean, does the far right actually want a government that functions?
I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I think it's worth noting again, 250 years of our democracy, and for the first time in history, you have 8 people overriding the will of 210 members of their party and the opposition party. They have caused government to grind to a halt. It's also the Republican Party basically punching itself in the face, which doesn't make political sense, but I think it benefits these individual members. It's a major threat to our democracy, and I think every American who cares about the health and strength of our democracy should be concerned about the fact that 8 people were able to do this.
Right. I mean, we talked about this yesterday, and the fact that we can say it was 200 and however many votes that actually voted to oust him from office, it really boils down to those 8. Those are the 8 people who made that decision and have really upended the course of where this Congress was going and the work that it was doing.
That's right. The idea that Democrats would somehow bail out Republicans runs against, every basic tenet of party politics. So there shouldn't have been an expectation that Democrats would do anything to support Kevin McCarthy. He has, in fact, impeached the leader of their party, so that It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, President Biden now saying that he's worried that all of this chaos in Congress could undermine his promise to give Ukraine the aid that they need in their fight against Russia. That's just one of many things that are on the line right this moment. How does he secure those funds? And if not, how catastrophic is that for the Ukraine? Because a moment like this doesn't just affect the United States.
That's right. And in fact, when we didn't include Ukraine funding in the most recent budget, it sent shockwaves throughout Europe and Kyiv. There are a majority of Republicans and Democrats in both houses of Congress that support providing aid to Ukraine. Ukraine aid is only 5% of our military budget, and yet it's become highly politicized, as you note, by the extremists in the Republican Party. I'll just say, again, looking at history, think about what empowered the rise of Hitler. Think about the countries that were tepid in their support, that stayed, didn't get into the game until very late. It's very significant that the United States is not supporting, has not put money on the table right now for Ukraine.
You know, I just want to go back to Dianne Feinstein for a second, because part of her legacy, as we mentioned before, was her ability to work, with people on both sides of the aisle. And there used to be, I feel like, in my lifetime, a time when you did see some bipartisan efforts being made in the Senate and in the House. Those days seem to be gone. So what does it tell you about where we are going when you can have a Speaker of the House punished, I guess, in this way because he made a deal with the other side?
Well, yes. I mean, it's a bygone era, right? Feinstein's passing really did kind of mark one of the last people who engaged in bipartisanship. And in fact, if you recall, in recent years, she's been criticized by her own party for doing that. That tells you where party politics are.
Right.
But it's not even the Republican Party. It's this extreme wing of the Republican Party. It's the MAGA wing. And I really feel for my Republican friends who can't get anything done, who can't pass policy or legislation because their party has essentially been hijacked by a very small minority.
All right, well, the far right calling on former President Donald Trump to become the next Speaker of the House. Such an interesting thing here that you don't actually have to be in the House to be a Speaker of the House. He has not exactly ruled that out, but he says for now he's focused on his presidential campaign. Who do you see becoming the next Speaker?
Well, two people have put their name in the hat, right? Jim Jordan, who is a Freedom Caucus founder, he's well to the extreme wing, so he likely wouldn't get the support he needs. I think Steve Scalise is probably the best bet. There might be a few others. Steve Scalise is further to the right than McCarthy, but he has a long track record that I think a lot of people can get behind in the Republican Party, including that more extreme wing. He was shot in 2017 at a congressional softball game, which got support from both sides, but he does have blood cancer, so that might be a factor that hurts his candidacy.
All right, Caroline Heldman, professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. It is always such a pleasure talking with you. We look forward to these Thursday conversations and all of your insights. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Caroline.